Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, today we're validating a massive group of people who are historically misunderstood and honestly deeply undervalued in our modern culture. I mean, we live in a world that absolutely cannot stop talking, right? It's loud, it's fast, and it constantly rewards the loudest voice in the room. But today, we're breaking down the core concepts from Susan Cain's groundbreaking book, Quiet, to uncover the immense, hidden power of those who prefer to listen.
And I want to hit you right out of the gate with the sheer scale of this. Look at this number. At least 1/3 of the people we know are introverts. 1 out of 3. That means in your family, your office, your friend group, or your classroom, a huge chunk of people are fundamentally wired differently than what society usually demands. We are not talking about some tiny fringe minority here. We are talking about a massive percentage of humanity.
So that brings us to the core question of this entire explainer. Are we dramatically undervaluing a third of our population? Just think about how much society loses by ignoring, sidelining, or trying to fix the quiet ones. When we build a world entirely for extroverts, we aren't just making life slightly uncomfortable for introverts. We are actively depriving ourselves of their unique insights, their creativity, and their profound contributions.
This really captures the daily friction so many people experience. On the one hand, you have the natural preferences of an introvert, listening rather than speaking, reading instead of partying, and creating solo rather than brainstorming in massive teams. But then, contrast that with the relentless, high-energy demands we face in modern schools and workplaces. The world today demands constant self-promotion and endless group work. There's just a deep structural mismatch between what introverts actually need to thrive and what society expects of them.
Section 1. The Extrovert Ideal, the Culture of Personality.
To really get where this bias comes from, we have to look back at history. The rise of the extrovert ideal throughout the 20th century was completely dramatic. Starting in 1912 with Dale Carnegie, we see the birth of the mighty likable fellow as the ultimate cultural standard. Then jump to the 1950s at Harvard Business School, where extroversion basically became synonymous with corporate success and leadership. Fast forward to the 90s, and this ideal just explodes into the hyper-enthusiastic, high-fiving crowds of Tony Robbins seminars, eventually pushing into the massive, highly social environments of the 2000s megachurches. We literally shifted from a culture that valued quiet character to one that completely worships loud personality.
So how does all this history impact us right now? Well, the extrovert's ideal gave birth to something called the new groupthink. It's this dominant value in American business culture that insists all creativity and intellectual achievement simply must come from a wildly collaborative place. But the book makes it totally clear. This forced collaboration actually stands in the way of true innovation. By shoving everyone into open-plan offices and demanding constant team brainstorming, we're basically killing the focused, quiet environment where true creativity actually happens.
Moving on to Section 2, Biology and Brain Science. Is temperament destiny?
Let's dig into some cutting-edge psychology here to see how our temperaments form in the first place. Have you ever heard of the orchid hypothesis? It's a fascinating look at nature versus nurture. The idea is that some people are like dandelions. They can survive and even function pretty well in almost any environment, no matter how chaotic or loud. But introverts, especially highly sensitive individuals, they're more like orchids. Put them in the wrong, overly stimulating environment and they'll wilt. But if you give them the right conditions, the right amount of quiet and focus, they don't just survive, they thrive spectacularly.
It's absolutely fascinating to see how extroverts and introverts actually process dopamine differently in the brain. Take Wall Street, for example, a hyper-extroverted, high-risk, reward-seeking environment that famously chased the dopamine hit of the next big win right over a cliff. Now contrast that with Warren Buffett. Buffett is a classic introvert. He thrives on careful, deliberate, quiet analysis. Because introverts and extroverts process these biological reward signals differently, introverts are actually often much better at delaying gratification and avoiding those reckless risks.
All right, Section 3, the power of working alone, the introvert advantage. When introverts are allowed to work on their own terms, the results are, quite literally, world-changing. Just look at these massive societal contributions. We owe Vincent van Gogh's breathtaking sunflowers to the intense, quiet focus of an introvert. We owe the very invention of the personal computer to an introvert working entirely alone, tinkering away in solitude, far from the noise of some loud brainstorming committee. Make no mistake, quiet innovation is a massive engine for human progress. This whole myth of the charismatic leader can really be debunked by this one powerful thought. Franklin was a politician, but Eleanor spoke out of conscience. We have this habit of conflating being loud, confident, and cool with being a good leader. But this highlights that moral depth, careful thought, and acting from a deeply held conscience, traits strongly associated with introverted temperaments, are often vastly more impactful than just being a smooth talker. Cool is highly overrated, you guys. Conscience is what's truly essential.
Let's ground these concepts in reality by looking at two highly successful introverts in roles you'd probably assume belong strictly to extroverts. First up, a public speaker. They deliver this witty, high-octane performance on stage. But their secret? They absolutely must recharge in total solitude afterward. Then we have a record-breaking salesman. He isn't winning by being brash and backslapping, he's winning by quietly tapping into the power of asking the right questions and actually deeply listening to the answers. So introverts don't need to morph into extroverts to succeed, they just need to use their own unique tools.
Which brings us to Section 4, Thriving in a Loud World, Cultivating Quiet Talent. It is so vital to recognize that the extrovert ideal isn't some universal human law. It's a cultural phenomenon. Just look at this stark contrast. On one side, we have the brash, highly vocal, backslapping atmosphere that's so typical in American schools. But on the other side, we have the concept of soft power, highly valued by many Asian American students, where listening, humility, and quiet dedication are what's revered. We've got to empathize with people who feel completely alienated by that loud setup and really start recognizing the incredible strength of the quieter approach.
So, how do we actually make this work in our daily lives? Here's some incredibly practical advice straight from the text. Step 1. We have to proactively negotiate the differences in our introvert-extrovert relationships. Understand that your partner or colleague might not be angry with you, they might literally just need quiet time to recharge their batteries. Step 2. We've got to empower and cultivate quiet kids in a world that often refuses to hear them. We need to stop telling them to come out of their shell and start valuing their deep focus. And step 3. For the introverts out there, it is perfectly okay to act like a pretend extrovert for the sake of a core personal project or passion, just as long as you grant yourself the solitude you need to recover afterward.
We've covered the science, the history, and the undeniable power of quiet innovation. So the final question I want to leave you with today is this: how will you empower the introverts in your world? Whether you're a teacher, a manager, a parent, or an introvert yourself, this information has the power to permanently shift how you see quiet people. It's time to stop fighting the silence and start listening to what it actually has to say. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.